Good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ismail Siragildin, and I am honored to be the co-chair of the Board of Trustees of the Nizami Ganjavi International Center. And we welcome you to this 10th edition of the Global Bakü Forum. We meet in difficult times. War is rending the fabric of peace, and humanity is increasingly divided by identity politics. This draws on the sense of identity, of belonging that people need to have to a community or to a people, and based on the mystic cords of memory to a historical narrative that identifies the people and community, but it also emphasizes divisions, whether ethnic, racial, religious, linguistic. But against that, we still have made enormous strides in recognizing our common humanity, partly by having all of us, all of the human race, agree in the United Nations on the Millennium Development Goals in 2000, and then again on the Sustainable Development Goals in 2015, where we set a common agenda for all of us, all of humanity. And now we face even bigger challenges. We're just barely coming out of the pandemic, which has taken millions of lives. We're under the threat of climate change, and increasingly, perhaps not as visibly, the water issues are beginning to come to the surface, and food security, because after all, 1 in 10 of the human family go to bed hungry every day. So there is injustice still against the poor and against discriminated people, whether it is women or minorities, in practically every society. And so we meet here in the Global Bakü Forum, where we mobilize the experience, the expertise, and even more so, the wisdom of all our participants to discuss with us how to rise to meet these challenges, how to bring the rays of hope to start the journey of hope towards these better tomorrows. And we need to think as we go along, what are the wrongs that we need resistance, and the rights that need assistance, and the future in the distance to which we must give ourselves. And so to start us on this journey of hope and reflection, I'm very honored to call on His Excellency President Ilham Aliyev to start us off on this discussion. Mr. President.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, dear guests. I welcome you all in Baku, and thank you for participating at the 10th Global Bakü Forum. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the members of board of Nizami Ganjavi International Center for their achievements. Especially want to express gratitude to the co-chairs of NGIS, Madam Vicky Freiberger and Mr. Sarıgeldin, for their leadership, for their contribution to development of NGIS, and for outstanding achievements with respect to transformation of Global Bakü Forum into one of the leading international fora globally. This year I participated in Davos World Economic Forum in January, in Munich Security Conference in February, and now here in March in Baku on Global Forum. And just I can say that the level of participants, the intellectual potential of Baku Global Forum is in line with the leading international conferences. And of course, this is a reflection of very thoughtful and productive activity of the co-chairs and the whole board. We have more than 350 participants from more than 60 countries, and among them 50 acting and former presidents and prime ministers, so we can imagine that the level of discussions will be very high, and of course the most important, the recommendations about new approaches to international affairs will be most valuable. I looked at the program of the forum. As usual, it's very comprehensive. It covers issues related to the regions, Middle East, Africa, Western Balkans. At the same time, issues which today are on top of international agenda and the subject of discussions. I also want to express gratitude to Nizami Ganjavi International Center for the great respect to the memory and legacy of the great Azerbaijani poet Nizami Ganjavi, whose name the center carries. Nizami Ganjavi was born, lived, died, and was buried in his native city of Ganja, one of the ancient cities of Azerbaijan. And his wisdom and talent symbolizes the wisdom and talent of people of Azerbaijan. I want to share my views and some information with respect to some of the topics of the discussions which you will have. I was very happy to see one panel on multilateralism, especially taking into account that Azerbaijan this year completes its chairmanship in non-aligned movement, which started in 2019 and was extended by unanimous decision of 120 member states for one more year until the end of 2023. We tried to, if I may use this word, to revitalize non-aligned movement, which had great traditions, but unfortunately, during some period of time, was a little bit passive. And for that, we organized international events, free summits. We initiated a special session of UN General Assembly on COVID. We worked hard and created a database with respect to fight against pandemic, which was lately used by World Health Organization. We dedicated one of the summits to fight against pandemic. We were very vocal against vaccine nationalism and unequal distribution of vaccines in the first months of the pandemic. We addressed the issue of post-COVID development. In the meantime, we provided financial humanitarian assistance to more than 80 countries, most of them members of non-aligned movement. We provided $10 million direct donations to World Health Organization to help them to fight the coronavirus. At the same time, we tried to institutionally develop non-aligned movement. For that purpose, based on our initiative, for the first time ever in the more than 60 years of the history of non-aligned movement, the parliamentary network was created. Inaugural meeting took place in Baku, and also youth network was created, and the secretariat for youth network also is based in Baku. We will continue our efforts even after our chairmanship comes to an end at the end of this year, because we see that there is a big need for such a movement in today's world, in today's divided world, when we see maybe the most serious confrontation between East and West since the end of the Cold War. Non-aligned movement can play and should play an important role in building bridges, in creating new approaches to resolution of conflicts, and of course the basic principles of non-aligned movement, so-called Bandung principles. They advocate for peace, cooperation, respect to territorial integrity, sovereignty, and inviolability of borders. With respect to the conflict resolution, of course it will be broadly discussed based on the program of the forum. I can share our experience. Conflict resolutions have two ways: peaceful and not peaceful. We were trying hard to resolve the conflict with Armenia by peaceful means, despite the fact that Armenian occupation created a humanitarian crisis in Azerbaijan. As a result of Armenian occupation, more than 1 million Azerbaijanis became homeless, became refugees and IDPs. Armenia conducted a policy of ethnic cleansing against Azerbaijanis, and expelled them from Karabakh and created sufferings for millions of Azerbaijanis. Despite our attempts to resolve it peacefully and to persuade Armenia to comply with UN Security Council resolutions which demanded immediate, complete, unconditional withdrawal of Armenian troops from Azerbaijani territories, Armenia just ignored UN Security Council resolutions and demonstrated disrespect to international law and international community. In 1992, just after the conflict started, the OSCE created Minsk Group, but unfortunately for 28 years, Minsk Group did not present any result, did not produce any result. And it seemed to us in the end of the negotiation process that they just wanted to freeze the situation. They wanted to make this conflict frozen forever. But we did not agree with that. And we did what we considered right to do, using our right for self-defense, UN Charter, particularly chapter Article 51. We liberated our territories by force. This was our legitimate right. So we tried to do it peacefully. We failed because there was no constructive approach from the Armenian side, and we did it by force, and we liberated our territory. And now for almost 2.5 years, we are rebuilding the huge territory of 10,000 square kilometers, which is totally devastated. And by the way, the representatives of NGIS visited Shusha, and I had a discussion, a panel discussion in Shusha, and they've seen the destruction in Fizuli, in Shusha, and it's really the sign of barbarism. It is urbicide, culturicide, ecocide. And that was done by our neighbors. People of Azerbaijan have a moral right to demand revenge, and I can understand it. But my message is that we took revenge on the battlefield. We did not commit any war crimes, unlike Armenians. We did not commit genocide, unlike Armenians did to us. And we took revenge on the battlefield, so now it's time for peace. Therefore, right after the war ended, in November 2020, we launched an initiative to start peaceful negotiations and presented a famous 5 principles, which could be a basis for peace agreement with Armenia. And we hope that international actors which try to facilitate will persuade Armenia not to lose this chance. They lost the chance to become an independent country. They become totally dependent, kind of a colony of other country and now maybe other countries. So they lost a chance to become really independent and to build their future because of aggression against us. So now it's a chance for them to start behaving as a neighbor to its neighbors. So we want peace, we don't want any other war, and we think that peace is achievable. What has been agreed between Azerbaijan and Armenia last October, particularly respect to each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity, actually demonstrates that there are no obstacles to achieve peace. With respect to the Armenian minority in Azerbaijan, Azerbaijan is a multi-confessional, multi-ethnic country. The rights of minorities in Azerbaijan are protected by our constitution, and anyone who knows the real situation in Azerbaijan can say that Azerbaijan is a country with a high level of religious and ethnic tolerance, where representatives of different ethnic groups, different confessions live in peace and dignity. So I'm sure that the life of Armenians who live in Karabakh region of Azerbaijan will be much better than it was during the times of occupation. Every conflict has its own history, has its own dynamics, and has its own end, but important is that disputes between countries are resolved on the basis of international law. Territorial integrity and sovereignty cannot be changed by force. This is the position of Azerbaijan, and this position applies not only to our case, but to all conflicts in the world, and we publicly articulate this position. One of the panels is devoted to energy and transportation corridors, energy transition. Just want to inform our guests that since we met last time, last June, there have been a lot of events taking place. First of all, Azerbaijan and European Commission signed a memorandum of understanding on the strategic partnership in the field of energy, which was signed in Baku by Madam Ursula von der Leyen, President of European Commission, and myself. And this memorandum is now being implemented. Azerbaijan increased substantially its natural gas supply to Europe and total export of natural gas. If we exported 19 billion cubic meters in 2029 totally, so this year it will be more than 24 billion cubic meters, and half of that, at least half of that, will go to Europe. And that definitely helped and will continue to help European consumers to get access to natural gas, taking into account the current geopolitical situation. We increased our investments in our gas fields, and now we even think, or not only think, we are working on expansion of the export pipelines. Southern Gas Corridor was commissioned, the final segment of the pipeline was commissioned on 31st December 2020. But now it's a little bit more than 2 years have passed, and we need to expand the system. Turn up from 16 to 32 billion cubic meters, and tap from 10 to 20 billion cubic meters. And that is only because of the growing demand in Europe. Otherwise, we wouldn't have invested. And since Russian-Ukrainian war started, we got requests from more than 10 European countries with respect to gas supplies or to increase the gas supply, and we're working on that. And it's not by chance that the European Commission calls Azerbaijan a reliable partner. This is the case. We've always been a reliable partner. We export oil, oil products, natural gas, electricity, petrochemicals to international markets, including European markets. And last December, there was also a remarkable event taking place in Bucharest, when Azerbaijan, Georgia, Hungary, and Romania signed an agreement on green energy and transmission, which was witnessed by the President of the European Commission. And based on that, we will build a transmission line from offshore wind farms in Azerbaijan to Europe. Part of this transmission line will go under the Black Sea. And now we are in the process of feasibility study. The first steering committee of this project took place in Baku this February. And it will be a huge change of European energy map. We already changed European energy map by building oil pipelines, gas pipelines, and now electric lines, which will deliver green energy. I just want to inform you that since we had the last 9th Global Baku Forum, Azerbaijan signed contracts and MOUs with several leading energy companies of the world, which will provide creation of 25 gigawatts of green energy in Azerbaijan, solar and wind. So this is a remarkable achievement. which will transform Azerbaijan into a very important supplier and player on and IFC already approved the final assessment of our offshore wind potential in the Caspian Sea, which is 157 gigawatt. Not to mention about 40 onshore. So this is the future for the world energy. This is the future for Azerbaijan. Energy transition here is developing very rapidly. Just as I said, since we met last time in June, we did what I have said. And also there'll be discussions on transportation corridors. Just want to inform you that last year transit through Azerbaijan grew more than 75%. Our modern transportation infrastructure now is needed more than ever before. With railroad connections, highway connections, with the biggest shipping fleet in the Caspian, with the biggest air cargo fleet in the region, we really contributed a lot to transportation security, because many countries now, they need transportation security. They are looking for new routes, and that one of these routes is through Azerbaijan. I'm sure there'll be very interesting discussions around these and other topics which are in the program, and as usual, valuable ideas and recommendations of our guests will help to plan our future, will be good recommendations to the governments, to world leaders, and thus I think we will try to contribute to make our world more safe and secure. Wish you interesting discussions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, for these enlightening words and encouraging us to explore all these issues as we will in the coming days. It is now my distinct pleasure to call on His Excellency, Mr. Egils Levits, President of the Republic of Latvia.
Thank you. Mr. President Aliyev, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in recent years I met you and high representatives of Nizami Ganjavi Center in Riga, in New York, in Davos 3 months ago, and now I am part of the 10th Baku Global Forum at its home here in Baku. And certainly Latvia's link to this forum is thanks to the leading role of Madam President Vīķe Freiberga, also through the regular participation of my predecessors here. And it's marked the good relations throughout the 30 years of independence between Latvia and Azerbaijan, and our common geopolitical concerns about issues of global importance, for Europe. And let me commend also President Aliyev for the leading role of Azerbaijan in the non-alignment movement. It's a valuable platform of 120 countries. It's majority of the United Nations. The leading role of Azerbaijan in the last years also is a demonstration of the widely recognition of Azerbaijan in international relations as for political inspirations, how we can preserve the peace and solve the global problems. Azerbaijan has played a leading role in the global discussions throughout and following the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, hosting 1 week ago the Contact Group Summit in response to COVID-19. Cooperation with Azerbaijan within the United Nations is very important also for Latvia. So, for example, on observance of international law, respect for territorial sovereignty is a cornerstone of Latvian foreign policy, and here we are in line absolutely with the foreign policy and the general politics of Azerbaijan. And this is one of the sources of the good relations between our countries. Dear colleagues, during this conference, different international challenges will be addressed. We are unfortunately living from crisis to crisis, and some beginning when others have not yet ended. This crisis demands attention, time, money, energy, but above all, the knowledge of which I can see here in this room, wisdom of experience. And therefore, I am keen to see after, or at the end of the forum, the recommendations of the forum, in particular on the issue how we can help the Ukraine to maintain and restore the territorial integrity, which I said already is a cornerstone of not only of the foreign policy of Latvia and Azerbaijan, but it is from global importance as a basis. Respect for international law is the basis for the peace in the world. Dear friends, the Azeri national poet Nizami Ganjavi inspired great minds far beyond the borders of current Azerbaijan. Each nation draws inspiration, its raison d'etre, from its culture, from the ancient to the present day. It is through open-minded intercultural exchange that understanding and friendship among nations grows. Let me conclude with the words of the famous Latvian poet Aspazija. She was, by the way, also one of the drafters of our constitution 100 years ago. And she said, "One must go through much smoke to see the fire." So we are in the situation when we are going through the smoke, but at the end we will see the fire. Thank you very much, and I wish you interesting discussions.
Thank you, Mr. President. And now I am honored to ask His Excellency José Ramos Horta, President of East Timor and Nobel Peace Prize laureate, to take the floor. Please.
Excellency President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege to be among global luminaries gathering at the 10th Bakü Forum under a very appropriate theme, the world of today, challenges and hopes. This peaceful, prosperous country, after years of war and suffering, is very naturally suited to host a summit of peacemakers, to explore alternatives to rivalries and wars, pathways to human fraternity and prosperity. I am an optimist, but I am not a hopeless romantic optimist. I believe there is always a light at the end of the tunnel. Timor-Leste, my country, is an oasis of tranquility. We live in peace and harmony with all our neighbors, and we enjoy exemplary relationship with all. There are no reported cases of politically motivated violence, nor are there reported cases of religious or ethnic-based tension and violence. Our democracy is a dynamic one, but we still belong in the fragile category. And by any definition, we are still a least developed country. Freedom House, Reporters Without Borders, and The Economist rate Timor-Leste very high in most categories, namely functional democracy, press freedom, #1 democracy in Southeast Asia, press freedom #17 in the world. Ours is an imperfect democracy, as most democracies are, but our people live in complete, unrestrained freedom. As we know, 2020, 2022 were terrible years for almost every country in the world. Hundreds of millions of fellow human beings, particularly the most vulnerable, children, women, and elderly, who had freed themselves from generations of living in abject poverty, were thrown back into extreme poverty. Child labor went back up. Many millions lost their lives. We in Timor-Leste came out of the pandemic almost unaffected when measured by the number of fatalities where COVID-19 was the direct cause. However, the unavoidable prevention measures imposed by health authorities impacted on people's livelihoods, particularly the rural poor, whose modest income depended on their ability to reach the markets to sell their products. Our vaccination campaign was highly successful, helped save many lives. We thank in particular Australian government, Australian doctors, Cuban Medical Brigade for their prompt support in strengthening our response capabilities. We thank also our many other friends near and distant, USA, Portugal, the European Union, New Zealand, Cambodia, China, Japan, South Korea, Indonesia, the UN system, in particular WHO, COVAX, UNDP, UNICEF, WFP. The global pandemic revealed in every country much of the ugly side of fellow human beings, but it also showed the better side of us, with touching stories of compassion and solidarity. We and our sister nations, members of small island developing states, least developed countries, and of the G7 plus of fragile states, we are innocent, absolved, are the main collateral victims of decades of reckless exploitation, depredation of Mother Nation by larger powers. But we refuse to finger-pointing, and instead we decide to work ourselves to reforest our mountains, green our valleys, our cities, plant fruit trees and flowers in every school, in every village. In my country, we agree on a people-centered, sustainable green economy, sustainable agriculture as national priority, water policy, protection of water sources, generate new water sources from ground, rain, and sea, a decent home for every destitute family, clean water for all, youth employment, elimination of extreme poverty, quality basic education and vocational education. On other matters, we remain firm against threats of and use of force in settling disagreements, disputes of all nature. We firmly uphold the UN Charter and in particular the principles and obligations of the states. We firmly uphold UNCLOS and in particular the EEZ provisions. We reject the militarization of South China Sea and attempts at undermining freedom of navigation in the area. We will join whatever consensus stands adopted by our common regional organization, ASEAN. Timor-Leste actively upholds ASEAN centrality. In this regard, we fully endorse ASEAN's stand on the situation in Myanmar. We are grateful and pleased with the decision of ASEAN leaders in welcoming Timor-Leste as the 11th member, with formal admission to take place sometime this year during Indonesia's presidency. Ladies and gentlemen, it was in December 1975 that I first set foot in New York at age 25. Young, inexperienced, impressionable, I addressed the UN Security Council. A memorable moment was when I met the Soviet ambassador to the UN, Yakov Malik, who was at the founding meeting of the UN in San Francisco in 1945. My meeting with Yakov Malik lasted only 10 minutes, most of which he was asleep. Not wanting to disturb his well-deserved siesta, I spoke very softly, which seemed to have an impact on him because he slept very deeply. Well, I would not imagine that a quarter of a century later, the mighty Soviet Union would dismantle itself in the face of the profound convictions of individuals like Andrei Sakharov, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, Lech Walesa, and Pope Jean Paul II. We witnessed the dismantle of the European Berlin Wall, Warsaw Pact, the liberation of Baltic states and Eastern Europe, and the end of apartheid. The theme of the 10th Global Bakü Forum, the world of today, challenges and hopes, encapsulate the reality of our world today. As a small country on the fringe of the globe, I want only to say we must avoid escalation of the war in Europe. We must prevent escalation of China-US rivalry. We must be alert to the increasing militarization of South China Sea. And let me say, a nuclear North Korea is a reality already, and there is nothing that will roll back this reality. In 2022, we all woke up to a war that didn't have to happen. After years of warnings and escalation tensions, President Putin finally did what was feared. He invaded Ukraine, an epic miscalculation with catastrophic consequences for Ukraine, for Russians, Europeans, and the rest of us, all paying a heavy price for a war not of our making. I personally believe that Europe should stay united, UK included in the European Union, the European home united, strong, prosperous, a bridge between the US and Russia, between the US and Asia. Far remote from the theater of war, we in Timor-Leste are mere collaterals of a war fought by supposedly enlightened civilizations. Could this war have been averted? Yes, it could. It should have been averted. But everyone miscalculated, misjudged, overestimated their own capabilities, underestimated the other side. And as everyone got involved in the conflict, no impartial mediator was left in the room. In a meeting with President Lula in January in Brazil, I suggested that Brazil, India, Indonesia, South Africa, Turkey, plus China should partner up to explore possibilities to engage the two countries in conflict towards mediating an end to this tragic war. Needless to say, the UN Security Council has been sidelined, obviously, for obvious reasons. Our collective security body is fractured, devoid of authority, like in Syria, Yemen, Afghanistan, and Myanmar, to mention just a few of the ongoing wars. The house of global security simply crumbled. To end, in the midst of turmoils across the world, the list is a very long one. Praise is due to UN agencies in the front line, sheltering and feeding, saving millions of innocent human beings who would have perished if these UN agencies were absent. So at least this is clearly the good side of multilateralism. So not all is bleak, but the clouds of war are hanging over us. So let's work harder on prevention of escalation of the tensions and threats to peace in the Korean Peninsula, in South China Sea, Taiwan, China-US, and China-India relations. I thank you, and God bless us all.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. It's now my great honor to turn to His Excellency Miguel Ángel Moratinos, Under Secretary General of the United Nations and High Representatives for the Alliance of Civilizations.
Your Excellency, Ilham Aliyev, President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, Excellencies, dear friends. Let me express, first of all, my dear and warm thanks to Nizami Ganjavi International Center for inviting me to address in their 10th Global Forum in Baku. Your Excellency, President Aliyev, it's always a great pleasure to be back to this fascinating city of Baku and Azerbaijan, the land of fire that you label it, but a fire that gives us energy and inspiration. Inspiration like our mentor, Nizami Ganjavi, a great poet and philosopher. I'm extremely thankful for our meeting yesterday you delivered to me, and I look forward to further strengthening the collaboration between Azerbaijan and the United Nations Alliance of Civilization. My dear friends, distinguished guests, it's a great honor to be among such a remarkable gathering of the best minds from all over the world. It's a testament of the outstanding work of the Nizami Ganjavi International Center under the leadership of the co-chair, Her Excellency President Vaida Bike-Freiberga and Dr. Ismail Seraheddin, and the able management of the Nizami Ganjavi International Center, Secretary General Mr. Robsan Muradov and his young team. The theme of the conference, the world today, challenges and hope, let me the opportunity to share with you some of my personal thoughts. I'm like our co-chairman, an ultimate optimist. I believe that challenges also offer opportunities and hope for change. But it's true, the world as we know today has reached a boiling point. I think we all could agree that we live in a global, complex, and uncertain world. A world crisis with geopolitical implication is snowballing with no end in sight. A climate disaster, a extreme serious economic situation, conflict that continue to rage and worsen. But above that, all human values are in a state of degradation that is not less serious than the continued degradation of our planet. The alarming rise in bigotry, hate speech, and discrimination based on religious belief, race, ethnicity, or gender clearly manifests the absence of compassion, humility, mutual respect, and acceptance of the other. Radical discourse and hate speech have been mainstream and have become the new normal. Far-right extremism has become the fastest growing threat around the world. Hardly one will get by without a violent incident or terrorist attack on a religious site or an individual because of who they are. My dear friend, our humanity is in a state of crisis. I think we all could agree with the great novelist Charles Dickens and his famous quote in his novel A Tale of Two Cities, and I quote, "It was the best of time, it was the worst of time. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair." Yes, my friend, challenges and hope are substantial in today's world. Never has humankind reached such level of sophistication and scientific, technological, communication advancement. Never have sapiens, Homo sapiens, advanced as much in biology, medicine, new technology, let alone the debatable artificial intelligence. But ironically, as much as we are interconnected today, this spring of hope is challenged by the winter of war, conflict, exclusion, discrimination, hate. My dear friend, where we are today, yes, we are in 2023. That means 2 decades have already elapsed since the start of a new century because, my dear friends, sometimes we don't realize that we are living in a new century, in the 21st century, and no longer in the 20th century. So what has happened during these 2 decades? As my dear friend, co-chair Ismail Sarahaldin last night mentioned, we started the new millennium, as Charles Dickens will say, with great expectation. Head of state and government gathering for the Millennium Summit in New York in 2000 to launch a new ambitious global agenda in order to address the real root causes of conflict and crisis, to put an end to hunger and poverty, to upgrade education, to address climate change. But in 2001, 9/11 and a band of terrorists kidnapped our best hope for the future. Yes, on March 20 of 2003, that means 20 years ago, the war in Iraq started. That war, my friends, looking from historical perspective, was unjust, illegal, and devastating for the people of Iraq and the entire region. And we are still paying the consequences of one of the worst strategic mistakes of humankind in recent history. It took us more than 12 years to try to redirect our efforts and chart a new course for the future generation. And in 2015, the international community endorsed the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The 17 SDGs became our compass guiding our policies to save the planet and find ways of how we can live together in peace. Does it mean that we have learned from past mistakes? I have to say, I think not. Once again, the war in Ukraine has set back this ambitious plan, which was already reeling as a result of the pandemic. The unacceptable invasion of Russian Federation to Ukraine put us again in this very negative scenario. The sad reality is that confrontation, bipolarity, mistrust, and the fight for hegemony are back on the global scene. Multilateralism is broken, and my dear friend Amr Moussa mentioned last night this double standard kill multilateralism. So we are now using a new way to address multilateralism, what I already told you several times, what we can qualify multilateralism à la carte. That means that few issues could be addressed, yes, climate change, or other issues, food security. But can we live only with a limited agenda? Can have a SDG going ahead if we have war, conflict, and an unstable scenario? I think that is the reality today. So that is where the United Nations Alliance of Civilization have reimagined our mandate, creating an alliance for peace and how to live together as one humanity. But how can we achieve this goal? Perhaps as I start, we can try to agree on what I believe is very obvious. The first element is that we are no longer living in the 19th century, not in the 20th century. We are, my friend, on the 21st century. And the West, I'm not fully convinced as a Westerner, a profound European, have to realize and accept that we are no longer the only actor in town, and that the rest of the world has something to say. It doesn't mean that our values and principles as West are something of the past. On the contrary, our principles, as reflected in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, should be our guiding principle. We should recall them and reinforce them, not diminish them. But my dear friend, at the same time, we should recognize that the existence of other civilizations, culture, and actors that demand the legitimate place and say in the new world. Towards an alliance of peace, living together as one humanity, was the motto of our 9th Global Forum of the United Nations Alliance on Civilization in Fez, in the Kingdom of Morocco. Many of you of Nizami Ganjavi's International Center were there, and you contributed to enrich the debate and the discussion in this forum. Our main takeaway from this forum is that apart from saving the planet, yes, we have to save the planet, but it's imperative, my dear friend, to save humanity. We should adopt a people-centric approach where the human being and the human dimension is at the core of our responses. Yes, we have challenges to confront. We are witnessing a new form of totalitarianism, ideological, technological, cultural, social, religious. But at the end of the day, whether this tendency of totalitarianism is coming from the East or from the West, from ideological ideas or from technological development, we should not forget that we, citizens of the world, we sapiens, we are the ones that can defend and protect our future as human beings. That is our main task, and this is where the UNOSC, the United Nations Alliance on Civilization, come into play. At the global level, UNOSC will continue to develop a strategy of engagement and dialogue with all the different actors, culture, religion, civilization, inclusive all. United Nations Alliance on Civilization will try to find the synergies and convergences, but also to deconstruct the controversies and address them in a meaningful way. At the micro level, UNOSC will continue to promote its initiative on prevention and mediation so as to avoid crises and eliminate tendencies that are the killer identities to be confronted between them, as Amin Malouf would say. It's the sense of the intervention of my dear friend Zipi Livni last night when he saw the need of having a belonging. Yes, my friend, we are moving forward in the right direction. Protecting biodiversity is essential for the survival of our planet, but also we need protecting cultural diversity. That is also essential for the saving of our humanity. I wish to conclude, my dear friend, by recalling the great poet Nizami Ganjavi, where humanity was the motive of the very heart of Nizami poetry. To him, humanity was his sacred mission in the service of his people. In this lies the immortality and eternal youth of Nizami art through the century. Very inspiring indeed. I congratulate Nizami Ganjavi International Center on the occasion of the 10th anniversary, and I wish them more success in the next 10 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It's now my great pleasure to turn to Her Excellency Winnie Byanyima, Under-Secretary General of the UN and Executive Director of UNAIDS.
Thank you, Moderator. Your Excellency, Ilham Aliyev, President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, Your Excellency, Egils Levits, President of the Republic of Latvia, Your Excellency, Jose Ramos Horta, President of Timor-Leste, my colleague from the United Nations, Miguel Morantinos, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to join you at this opening ceremony of the 10th Global Bakü Forum. I congratulate very much the Nizami Ganjavi International Center for organizing this forum under the theme, The World of Today, Challenges and Hopes. We are indeed facing serious challenges the world over, from climate change impacts to armed conflict to health emergencies. In 2 days' time, on the 11th of March, we will mark 3 years since the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic. Halfway to our 2030 deadline, progress on the Sustainable Development Goals is not where it needs to be. We are seriously off track. To rescue the Sustainable Development Goals, the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has put forward what he calls the SDG stimulus. It outlines the need for the international community to come together to mobilize investments for the Sustainable Development Goals. And in so doing, to as well create a new international financial architecture that would ensure that finance is automatically invested to support just, inclusive, and equitable transitions for all countries. In my own work, leading the joint United Nations program on HIV/AIDS, we are also not on track. We have been fighting a pandemic for 40 years. There's no cure for HIV, there is no vaccine. But today, 38.4 people are living with HIV, and we saw in 2021 1.5 million new infections globally, and we also saw 650,000 AIDS-related deaths. That's 2021. But the focus for this week's forum is challenges and hopes. There is always hope, including in the AIDS response. In this region where we are, which has actually the fastest growing HIV epidemic in the world, we can reverse the trend by applying new treatments coming on the market and prevention technologies, and addressing also law reform. Through the advances of science, through the activism of civil society, through the hard work on the ground by communities, we've been able to make remarkable progress. AIDS is no longer a death sentence. There is treatment for every person leading every kind of life. At UNAIDS, we are pursuing the hope to end AIDS as a public health threat. So I'm pleased that over the next 3 days, we will focus not just on the challenges, but also on the solutions, on how to overcome the adversities that we face in the world today. Together, I too have hope. I'm optimistic and not a hopeless romantic, as someone has said. Together we can achieve peace and development and achieve those sustainable development goals. I look forward to our discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Under Secretary. And now it's my pleasure to call on His Excellency Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, who is Director General of WHO and who has sent us a message because he couldn't join us in person today. May we have the video message, please?
Your Excellency, President Aliyev, Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends, I thank the government of Azerbaijan and the Nizami Ganjavi International Center for hosting this important discussion. I'm very sorry I can't be with you in person. The last 3 years have shown clearly that the challenges of the 21st century require new approaches to multilateralism and partnerships. We must learn the lessons of this pandemic, and yet there are already worrying signs that the world is falling back into the familiar cycle of panic and neglect. In a world confronted with multiple overlapping crises, we need to forge a new level of international cooperation and coordinated action to keep us safe from the global health threats of the future. We need a change of perspective in three crucial ways. First, we must see health not as a tool to divide, but as a bridge to peace. Health is one of the few areas in which countries can work together across the ideological divide. We need a shared approach to shared health threats today. That's why the politicization of health is so dangerous and must be resisted. As you know, countries are now negotiating an international accord on pandemic preparedness and response as a critical pillar of the global health architecture. It's critical to emphasize that this accord is being negotiated by countries for countries and will be adapted and implemented by countries in accordance with their own national laws. It will not give WHO any powers to do anything without the express permission of sovereign nation states. Second, we must see health not as a cost to control, but as an investment to nurture. The COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated that a pandemic is more than just a health crisis. It can disrupt societies, economies, education, trade, security, and much more. Likewise, investments in health are not only investments in healthier populations, they're investments in economic, social, and political stability and security and sustainable development. Third, we must see health not as a privilege to earn, but a human right to protect. This year marks the 75th anniversary of the founding of WHO. In 1948, in the aftermath of the Second World War, the nations of the world came together to recognize that the only alternative to global conflict is global cooperation. The Constitution of WHO affirms that the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health is one of the fundamental rights of every human being, without distinction of race, religion, political belief, economic or social condition. Those words remain as true and important today as when they were written 75 years ago. Health is not a tool to divide, but a bridge to peace. Not a cost to control, but an investment to nurture. Not a privilege to earn, but a human right to protect. I thank you.
We thank His Excellency Tedros Ghebreyesus for this intervention. May I now turn to His Excellency Sergio Mattarella, the President of the Republic of Italy, who has sent us a message, and I believe it will be read by the Ambassador. Please, you have the floor, sir.
Mr. President, Excellencies, I express my sincere gratitude to you and everyone who is actively working at the Nizami Ganjavi International Center for the invitation to take part in the Baku Global Forum. Although I could not participate in the progress of works, I would like to congratulate you on the chosen theme, The World Today, Challenges and Hopes, which will highlight the 10th edition of the initiative. I can confirm with great pleasure that the work carried out by your center is expanding and strengthening year by year to promote and reaffirm the value of mutual understanding and peaceful coexistence among nations in order to stimulate cooperation and dialogue among peoples and cultures. While the war in Ukraine continues to rage as a result of the weak will to power of the Russian Federation, initiatives like the one in Baku are undoubtedly useful in preventing misunderstanding, tension, and intolerance. In fact, everything from the peaceful coexistence between the great powers to the mitigation of climate change, the fight against poverty and underdevelopment, which are considered the challenges of this era, require a deep reflection on the compatibility between the desire of government and the one representative of various components of the society in order to forge and pursue a common and sustainable public policy. Mr. President, once again, I highly appreciating your activities. I wish you success for the Bakü Global Forum, and I take this opportunity to express my deepest respect to you. Sergio Mattarella, President of the Italian Republic.
Thank you. And we now turn to His Excellency Rishi Sunak, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, who has also sent us a message, and it's my understanding His Excellency the Ambassador will read it.
Thank you, Moderator. Hürmetli Cenab President, Your Excellency, President Aliyev. Congratulations on the 10th meeting of the Bakü Global Forum. This is a vital moment for those of us who value sovereignty and the rule of law. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is a grotesque insult to our shared values. Nation-states should be free to decide their own destinies, free to realize their potential. Russia's invasion of Ukraine seeks to crush that freedom. Thousands of lives have been lost and millions more damaged, all in a desperate and failing attempt to subjugate a sovereign nation. Confronted by the extraordinary resilience of the people of Ukraine and by its own military failure, Russia has cynically turned its fire on civilian infrastructure. The UK will keep supporting a free Ukraine. We know that the only outcome which will protect the future of Europe and the principles of freedom and sovereignty is Ukrainian victory. The nations of Europe that value freedom appreciate Azerbaijan's contribution to our collective security. We are ending Russia's ability to use energy supplies to control and manipulate. There are now twin imperatives: reliable and affordable energy supplies and a transition away from the fossil fuels that are damaging our climate. The prospect of Azerbaijan supplying renewable electricity across the Black Sea represents a brighter future. I hope green transformation can be accelerated in parallel with the expansion of gas supply through the Southern Corridor. British companies and institutions will continue to be key partners in Azerbaijan's energy transition. I am proud that the UK continues to support women and civil society organizations who are playing a key role in reviving communities in Azerbaijan's returned territories. British experts will work alongside yours as you make resettled areas safe from mines and unexploded ordnance. United Nations agencies also play an important role, and I encourage you to sign key non-proliferation texts such as the Ottawa Convention. I wish you fruitful discussions. The UK will continue to stand alongside Azerbaijan as you chart a progressive and independent course through 2023 and beyond. Yours sincerely, Rishi Sunak, Prime Minister of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Thank you. And now it is my great pleasure and privilege to turn to Her Excellency Vaira Viki Freiberga, former President of Latvia and co-chair of the NGIC. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your Excellency, President Ilham Aliyev, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this is the 10th time that the Bakü Forum meets. And from year to year, we have been pleased to see it gain in importance in terms of its convening power, in terms of the diversity and the exceptional quality of experience and intellect of the participants that we are so happy to receive here. The Bakü Forum could not have taken place and be initiated without the support of the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan. President Ilham Aliyev, from the start, saw the possibility of Baku becoming not just the hub of transportation and the hub of energy that it is at the moment developing in a most active way, but also a hub for the exchange of ideas. And we'd like to thank you very much in the name of the International Board of the Nizami Ganjavi Center, of our wonderful Secretariat and its Secretary General Rovshan Muradov, for the support that you have given in allowing us a splendid venue here in your capital city, in helping us to being the host to this wide and varied public, and give us an opportunity to discuss questions that are hopes and concerns for the whole world, and on which hopefully the whole world can agree, but at the same time to remind us that from every corner of the world, the angle is somewhat different. The concerns that are of immediate primacy for each region and country are not exactly the same. And it is with a sympathetic ear that we listen to the various concerns and understand that we have to answer to all the needs everywhere if we are to wind up as a humanity traveling together and being aware of it on this spaceship Earth as the home and the ground under our feet. But we must realize also that the planet is lent to us for our lifetimes and the lifetimes of the countries we come from. The planet can rise up against one species or another. It got rid of the dinosaurs, or it got rid of it through the intervention, if you like, of meteors coming from space. But when tectonic plates are shifting, not in a metaphoric but in a physical way, there's little that humans can do to stop them. They can adapt to it, adjust to it. When pandemics strike, again, we cannot stop the pandemic entirely in its tracks. But yes, humanity, if it is united, if it understands the importance of solidarity, of a common understanding of what the danger is, of what the harm is doing to various parts of society, then measures can be taken to respond and to take collective action, to have vaccines that are available to the world at large and not just to those who can most afford them, to have interventions where, when we consider the achievements of the United Nations since its creation and the recognition of the human rights that it has spelled out in specific detail, we realize that we are still a long way from it if there are countries in the world that will use either religion as an ideology, or a political ideology, or a self-invented revisionist view of history to use their power and the means at their disposal to take away the rights of others. It is not acceptable, I think, and we should come to an understanding. Yesterday was the International Day of Women. It is not acceptable to have countries where little girls are not allowed to have education. Women are half of the human race, And before being women, they are little girls. And if they are not given education, then any country that lives under such a regime is doomed to obscurantism and backwardness. Similarly, women, when they grow up, are not just brood mares in charge of perpetuating the human race, but they are human beings on an equal footing with men. And whatever the ideology in place and whatever the religious beliefs, they should not be allowed to interfere with principles of that nature. But in our world today, there is also a significant and I would say major difference in terms of the power the countries hold, either economically or militarily or in terms of size. And we must remember that here again the United Nations Charter gave every nation, every sovereign nation, an equal voice in the General Assembly. That principle is not just practical in terms of the running of the United Nations. It should be a universal principle that is accepted as real in international relations. When a larger country attacks its neighbor simply for the simple fact of saying that sometime in history we were grander and larger and your very existence is an insult to us because it takes away from our greatness, then this is not acceptable, and this is what we are seeing in the unprovoked aggression against Ukraine. We will be discussing, among other topics, the situation about how wars can be avoided, how they can be stopped, how we can overcome the damages, the devastation that is wrought by war. And here we have an ongoing case by the invasion of Ukraine, but others elsewhere in the world. There are also conflicts raging that need to be solved at some point. If I may just very briefly remind you, from my point of view and that of the current president of Latvia, about where we stand as small countries, being part of the European Union and being part of the North Atlantic Treaty Alliance, and a direct neighbor to Russia, that we are being told that the war in Ukraine might have been avoided and that there's somehow a mistake have been made from the part of the West, that they are really responsible for Russia crossing their borders and attacking another country. But why? Simply because they exist. When we applied to NATO, I was being told, we are not sure by the existing members of NATO. We are not sure whether we are ready to accept you because your big neighbor will not be happy about it. And I spent years, and our diplomats spent years, and the other countries and the candidates, reminding the world that no country, no one country, including mine, has been put on God's earth for the simple aim, and the only aim in life, to please their neighbor who happens to be bigger, has a bigger army, and has nuclear weapons. We cannot accept a world where such principles exist. We cannot accept that countries do not have the choice of deciding whether they are a separate country or not. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, it collapsed because of its own internal weaknesses. Nobody attacked it from outside. And when new countries appeared on the map, which had been forcefully and brutally erased from it for half a century, new countries like Azerbaijan, like Georgia, like Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, could come back. Ukraine came back on the world stage, and they did not take away anything from anybody else. They took back what was theirs by right and by inheritance. And nobody in the world, no matter how many nuclear warheads are in their possession, we should not accept them imposing their will on others, because if they impose it on their small neighbors, the time will come when they will be imposing their will on larger neighbors. And do not, by any means, just because you live far away from a country like that, that you are in security and that nothing can ever threaten you. I assure you that that would be a costly illusion. The revisionist presentation of history is one of the dangers that, along with religious ideology and extremist political ideologies, are the biggest sources of conflict between human beings individually, within the frontiers of different countries, between different social groups, ethnic groups, religious groups, and between sovereign nations when their sovereignty is being attached. I'd like to take this opportunity to express my admiration to Azerbaijan for the fact that it is a country, a majority Muslim country, which rigorously applies religious freedom as a principle there. A country where women's rights are being respected, and a country that, congratulations on the current chairmanship of the non-aligned countries of the world. Of course, there is a variety of positions that countries will take, but the important thing is that in taking their various positions, they should be open to a dialogue, but not a dialogue of the deaf, as the French put it. One cannot have a dialogue that denies from the start that your position has no right and you cannot put it forth. So when we are told to have dialogue, it does not mean that if somebody attacks us, rapes our children, our women, kills civilians and soldiers alike, that a country like Ukraine has no right to defend itself in case this destabilizes the world and creates dangers for others. Nobody has the right to demand that another country suffer grievous assault and damage without resisting and without taking arms to do so. I wish you, ladies and gentlemen, that your country be spared what we are seeing in Ukraine, and I certainly hope that our having managed to join the North Atlantic Treaty Alliance will protect us as a small country against a neighbor who, frankly, has gone off the rails in terms of its international relations. I wish you Godspeed as you return to your countries, and I wish you an interesting coming days in terms of exchanging your views and your concerns. We are, all of us, travelers on the same spaceship, and we must live together if we are to survive. Thank you.
Thank you, President Vieira. You really reminded us of many things which we will be addressing in the coming few days. And now, Your Excellency, Mr. President Ilham Aliyev, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all. And with the closing of this opening session, we now declare the 10th Global Bakü Forum open for discussion and debate. Thank you, each and everyone.